quelques jours, ils savent ce qu'ils veulent en français ou en anglais, et ils vont me demander de répéter, puis ils vont peut-être me demander de signer.
Aïe, aïe, aïe.
C'est seulement si c'est quelque chose de très intéressant dans une langue qu'ils le veulent dans l'autre langue. Alors,
c'est un signe que tu as dit quelque chose d'intéressant. Qui te demande de traduire.
Aïe, aïe, aïe.
Aïe, 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 c'est un peu moins intéressant dans cette réponse.
Welcome to this press conference following the EU-Canada summit. Good morning to everyone. Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier Ministre. Welcome, President of the Council and the President of the Commission. We'll have introductions by the three speakers, and then we'll take questions both here in the room and virtually. There's translation into French and English, mind you. President of the Council, please.
Merci beaucoup, mesdames et messieurs, cher Justin, chère Ursula. C'était un plaisir particulier hier de tenir ce sommet bilatéral avec le Canada, représenté par Justin Trudeau et par son équipe. Le Canada est un allié essentiel de l'Union européenne. Nous partageons des valeurs très solides, tournées vers le multilatéralisme, tournées vers la coopération internationale, tourner aussi vers l'état de droit et vers ces libertés fondamentales qui nous tiennent à cœur. 4 points étaient à l'agenda de nos travaux hier. Bien sûr, la nécessité de continuer à agir pour vaincre ce Covid-19 et bâtir la relance économique qui est nécessaire. Deuxième élément, le changement climatique, les questions environnementales. Troisième élément, le commerce, l'innovation, la question digitale. Et enfin, nous avons aussi évoqué les questions d'affaires étrangères et les questions de sécurité. First topic, defeating COVID-19 remains our top priority. The EU is the largest exporter of vaccines, and we've exported roughly half of our production of vaccines. We have supported Canada's vaccination campaign by shipping roughly 16 million doses to Canada. This represents 60% of all vaccines received by Canada, and until a few weeks ago, it was as high as 80%. With Canada, we are stepping up our efforts to ensure universal access to vaccines, diagnostics and treatments, and the EU is a top contributor to COVAX with 3.2 billion euros. We also plan to share at least 100 million doses of vaccines by the end of this year, and we have mobilized 1 billion euros to increase global production of vaccines in developing countries. We also took the decision to launch a new Canada-EU dialogue on health. And when we speak about the future, that also means being better prepared for future pandemics. We are working together to strengthen the WHO, and I welcome Prime Minister Trudeau's support for this idea of an international treaty on pandemics in the framework of the WHO. The EU and Canada are also banding together to ensure a green, innovative and inclusive recovery that creates good jobs. We support global efforts to provide additional support to low-income countries to recover. Nous avons aussi abordé les questions de changement climatique. Je voudrais me concentrer sur cet objectif commun, la neutralité climat à l'horizon 2050. Et je voudrais aussi indiquer que nous avons eu un débat intense hier sur 2 sujets extrêmement importants. La question du prix du carbone, la nécessaire garantie de travailler pour qu'il y ait de la convergence sur la manière d'atteindre des objectifs ambitieux. Et en lien avec le prix du carbone, la question de la finance verte est aussi très certainement un sujet qui doit nous mobiliser pour tenter de progresser vers une convergence en termes de standards communs pour mobiliser les capacités financières du secteur privé grâce à des objectifs clairs fixés par les autorités politiques sur le plan national et sur le plan international. This year, we celebrate the 5th anniversary of the signing of CETA. This agreement is good for our citizens, for our businesses, and for our economic recovery. And we see eye to eye on the need to strengthen, modernize and reform the WTO for the future. Moving forward, we must ensure the security of critical minerals and metals value chains, and we agreed to launch an EU-Canada strategic partnership on raw materials. We'll continue to enhance our cooperation on research, innovation and space. Et enfin, nous avons eu l'occasion, dans la prolongation d'ailleurs de débats intenses tout au long du week-end en lien avec le G7 en Grande-Bretagne, d'aborder les questions de sécurité internationale. Et je voudrais réaffirmer ici encore notre engagement pour la coopération internationale, pour le multilatéralisme et notre conviction que nous sommes dans un moment de l'histoire des relations internationales où plus que jamais les démocraties, les sociétés libérales doivent se tenir debout pour porter nos valeurs fondamentales, pas simplement pour réagir quand nous sommes mis sous pression par des régimes autoritaires, mais pour agir afin de démontrer que nos modèles de coopération sont efficaces et permettent d'améliorer les libertés, d'améliorer les conditions de vie de nos citoyens. On a aussi l'occasion, bien sûr, d'aborder des questions plus spécifiques en lien avec des situations régionales et bien sûr, nous nous tiendrons disponibles pour réagir en cas de questions sur ces questions plus particulières. D'un mot, vous l'avez compris, la relation Union européenne-Canada, elle est solide, elle est étroite. Et cette rencontre hier soir a été l'occasion de donner un élan supplémentaire, d'identifier les points spécifiques pour lesquels nos équipes vont continuer dans les mois qui viennent à travailler. Il y a un canal de dialogue permanent entre le Canada et l'Union européenne que nous avons décidé de renforcer, de conforter parce que nous mesurons bien que cette coopération elle est utile pour l'Union européenne, pour le Canada, mais aussi pour faire progresser des sujets d'intérêt internationaux. Merci.
Thank you, President. Madam President, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. A very warm welcome to you. Justin, it's so good to have you here in Brussels. Of course, we did have excellent exchanges at G7, but meeting you here in Brussels gives us as Europeans the opportunity to let you know how much we value our very special partnership with Canada. We do share the same interests, we have the same values, we share the same worldview, and we have the same understanding that it is multilateralism that we want to strengthen to address today's global challenges. So indeed, yesterday we explored ways to deepen this partnership. First of all, let me have a look at the health topic. We will work hand in hand to overcome this pandemic. And indeed, the very first topic is always vaccines. There is a high demand for global vaccines. We want to make sure that Canada knows that you can count on us, that you can count on the European solidarity. Canada is the EU's top 4 export destination for COVID-19 vaccines. We have ensured an uninterrupted export of vaccines to Canada, and we will continue, of course, to do so. Now, what we really need besides vaccines is to be better prepared. So I was very grateful, Justin, for your support at the Global Health Summit in Rome, where we created the Rome Declaration, because by that we now have a roadmap to recover and to be more prepared and better prepared to deal with global health crisis in the future. We need better surveillance. We need better preparedness in the infrastructure. It would be good if we worked together, and we agreed on that, to reform WHO, because in particular we have to improve the early warning system, and we have to improve the investigative powers of WHO, because we all know that we lost precious months at the beginning of the pandemic. And as part of these lessons learned, yesterday we decided to launch an EU-Canada dialogue on health. So we will share expertise, we will share lessons learned and practices that are best practices to be better prepared and work closely together on these issues. We also discussed how to ensure that new technologies like mRNA come to Africa or, for example, Latin America. And one important step here is to find a consensual form within the TRIPS agreement. So here also thank you for the cooperation. On climate change, EU and Canada will also work closely on fighting climate change. We count on Canada as our strong ally in this fight. We have discussed the way to global carbon pricing. That would be ideal if we have many supporters on carbon pricing. But of course, also in that context, how to sustain our competitiveness and the question of industrial transition and how to prevent carbon leakage. Both Canada and the European Union have an ambitious climate agenda, and we both know that it is not only about goals. It's good to have good, strong goals, ambitious goals, but it's about how to get to those goals. And there we offer to coordinate closely before Glasgow, because we need an ambitious agreement on with the international community to make Glasgow, the COP26, a success. I very much welcome Canada's commitment to tackling the loss of biodiversity and your decision to join the EU in banning single plastic use, because we also need to team up on our way to Kunming, to the COP15. Our planet needs us, and it needs us to set an ambitious global biodiversity framework for the COP15. It should be like the Paris Agreement, but now for biodiversity. Speaking of sustainability, we agreed on building a strategic partnership on raw materials. We, as Europeans, want to diversify our imports away from producers like China, because we want more sustainability, we want less environmental damage, and we want transparency on labour conditions. These raw materials, like, for example, critical minerals and metals, are indispensable for the green and the digital transition. On trade, we had the occasion to reaffirm our commitment to the full implementation of CETA. It is a crucial asset for our economies on our way to recovery. And the figures are quite telling. If you look at 2019, trade between the European Union and Canada increased by 25% for goods and by 39% for services compared to the pre-CETA levels. So it is good for jobs, it is good for growth on both sides of the Atlantic. And for that, we should work together to solve the issues that prevent CETA from unleashing its full potential for jobs and growth. Finally, let me mention research. As you know, the next EU budget for the next 7 years is in place, and it includes a very substantial envelope for research and innovation, our Horizon Europe programme. We invited Canadian researchers to participate in our programs. We want them with us to intensify the exchanges between our innovators, for example, in bioeconomy, advanced manufacturing, clean energy, digital technologies, you just name it. And our Canadian friends were happy about this invitation, so many, many thanks to our friends and strong allies, and a very warm welcome again to Brussels here.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Prime Minister.
Merci. Bonjour à tous. Hello everyone. Merci d'être des nôtres. Nous venons de participer ensemble à un sommet très productif avec nos partenaires européens. C'est toujours un grand plaisir de m'entretenir avec le président Michel et la présidente von der Leyen. En tant qu'amis et alliés, le Canada et l'Europe partagent des priorités communes. Plus que jamais, il faut continuer de travailler ensemble pour relever les différents défis devant nous. On a abordé divers sujets, notamment la pandémie et l'importance de rebâtir nos économies tout en faisant croître la classe moyenne. On a aussi discuté de notre lutte contre les changements climatiques, de notre collaboration en ce qui concerne les nouvelles technologies et de notre engagement à défendre nos valeurs communes comme la démocratie, les droits de la personne, l'égalité entre les sexes et la primauté du droit. Mais avant de parler de notre important travail avec l'Union européenne, j'aimerais dire quelques mots sur les autres rencontres des derniers jours. As you know, over the weekend, I was at the G7 in Cornwall with Ursula and Charles. As we continue the fight to end COVID-19 for good, we took a strong stance on major issues, including on access to vaccines, climate change, and global education. Yesterday, I took part in the NATO summit, along with our allies here in Brussels. The alliance is united, and committed to continuing its important work on national and international security. We all agreed that we need to continue to adapt to new security challenges, including climate change and cyber threats. Our world is at a unique moment in history, and not only because of this pandemic. We must stand united. I'm encouraged by the collaboration I've seen between our friends and allies this week and during my meeting with the European Union. Our priorities are clear. Together, we must end this pandemic, rebuild our economies, and keep our people safe. Rebuilding our economies means thinking about the future. With EU partners, we talked about what we can do to build a cleaner economy for years to come. To begin with, in order to continue creating good, green jobs for the middle class, we must secure supply chains for critical minerals and metals that are essential for things like electric car batteries. That's why Canada and the EU are launching the Strategic Partnership on Raw Minerals. This new partnership is focused on securing the supply of these critical minerals, all while creating and supporting good jobs. Of course, we can't talk about supply chains without also talking about trade agreements. On that front, Canada and the EU are continuing our partnership under CETA to create opportunities for workers and businesses alike on both sides of the Atlantic. During our summit, we advanced our work to adopt a mutual recognition agreement that would simplify border procedures while enhancing security measures. This agreement will further speed up the flow of trade between Canada and the EU and contribute to the safety and security of all Canadians. We know that we've worked very hard together, the Europeans and Canada, over the past number of years. Even as other countries were slightly more protectionistic, we were able to get many things done during an uncertain time on the global stage, which led us to strong advances for our citizens, for our economies, advances that we are continuing to build on today as we move forward at an even accelerated pace. Our government will continue to ensure all Canadians benefit from these progressive trade deals, including farmers, small and medium-sized business owners, women entrepreneurs, and the middle class. That's what Building Back Better is all about, an economy that leaves no one behind. And at the heart of that more resilient economy is climate change. Les changements climatiques et la perte de biodiversité sont des menaces existentielles. En plus de continuer nos efforts pour atteindre la carboneutralité d'ici 2050, le Canada et l'Union européenne vont renforcer leur collaboration pour développer des mesures et des technologies qui feront en sorte que la transition énergétique soit équitable pour tous. Parce que la santé de notre économie et la santé de notre planète sont liées. Plus on va créer de bons emplois verts, plus on va permettre à nos enfants à respirer de l'air propre. Et pendant qu'on travaille pour réduire nos émissions, on doit aussi en faire plus pour protéger nos terres et nos océans. On parle souvent d'une économie plus verte, mais il ne faut pas oublier de parler d'une économie plus bleue aussi pour nos océans. À ce sujet, avec l'Union européenne, on va lancer le Forum de partenariat maritime qui aura pour but d'améliorer la collaboration entre les entreprises, les gouvernements et les autres partenaires afin de mieux protéger nos océans. On veut également s'assurer que notre agriculture soit plus durable. C'est pourquoi, suite à ce sommet, on va lancer une série d'initiatives qui aidera à informer et à faire la promotion d'une agriculture plus propre auprès des agriculteurs, des producteurs et d'autres organisations. On s'engage tous à continuer de prendre des mesures concrètes pour protéger notre environnement parce que notre santé et notre sécurité en dépendent. When it comes to health and safety, job one remains ending this pandemic. And as we do that, we have to continue strengthening our health systems for today and for the future. To support pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, we will launch the Canada-EU Dialogue on Health. This will help Canada and Europe share more information, identify emerging health threats, and work together to keep people healthy, including through mental health support. And on the subject of the pandemic and vaccines, I want to pick up on what both Ursula and Charles talked about and say thank you. Thank you not just to European leaders, but to workers across Europe who've been getting the world through this pandemic by producing life-saving vaccines. Canada's friendship and close alliance with Europe is certainly something that we have counted on, but we will continue to work together to make sure that in the future, Canada continues to be a strong partner to get us all around the world through pandemics like this. Whether it's creating jobs or ending the pandemic, whether it's making our economies more competitive in the digital world or standing up for our shared values around the globe, together, Canadians and Europeans will continue to build a better future. Alors qu'on s'apprête à rebâtir, suite à la pandémie, le partenariat entre le Canada et l'Union européenne est plus fort que jamais. Que ce soit suite au sommet d'aujourd'hui ou suite aux autres sommets de la semaine, je suis optimiste quant à notre volonté commune de créer un monde plus propre, plus inclusif et plus sécuritaire. On a encore beaucoup de défis devant nous, mais on va continuer de travailler ensemble pour les relever. Merci beaucoup, mes amis. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. We'll take a few questions first in the room here. Louis Blouin from Radio Canada, please.
Bonjour, Louis Blouin. Première question, je l'adresserai au président Michel, Madame la Présidente, sur les brevets de vaccins. Le Parlement européen s'est prononcé en faveur de ça la semaine dernière. Est-ce que c'est de nature à vous faire changer de position là-dessus, à influencer votre réflexion? Vous en êtes où et comment expliquer cette résistance qui semble se maintenir sur cette idée-là?
D'abord,
et si possible de répondre en français et en anglais, mes collègues anglophones apprécieraient beaucoup.
Je t'avais averti.
Thank you for this question, but we are totally convinced that what you are trying to do, this third way proposed by Ngozi in the framework of the WTO, is the right approach, because the liberalization of the intellectual property will not be the magic bullet or the silver bullet. I mean that we need a more global approach. We need to take into consideration the transfer on know-how, the transfer on technologies. And it's exactly what we are trying to do with the Commission. They took the decision to mobilize 1 billion euros, especially for Africa, in order to work on very concrete projects and to take into consideration this partnership between the public authorities and the private sector, and to make sure that we can increase the manufacturing capacities in Africa, for example, or in Latin America. And it's very important for us to diversify the supply chains in the future. But in the very short term, the decision to liberalize immediately the intellectual property is our opinion. We will not solve everything in the very short term. En français, en un mot, nous sommes totalement convaincus que l'approche la plus pragmatique, la plus concrète, on en a beaucoup discuté dans le cadre du G7, c'est l'approche globale. C'est faire en sorte que, bien entendu, nous puissions au cas par cas prendre en question cette question de propriété intellectuelle dans le cadre d'un partenariat public-privé avec les autorités d'un certain nombre de pays, notamment en Afrique et en Amérique latine. Et la simple proposition de libéraliser la propriété intellectuelle ne va pas résoudre par magie cette question de la production de vaccins. On sait bien que produire un vaccin n'est pas produire un produit ordinaire. Il ne s'agit pas de mettre sur Internet la recette pour que chacun dans sa cuisine puisse produire des vaccins. Il faut prendre en compte de manière plus large les transferts de technologie, les transferts de know-how. Et nous constatons que cette position est de plus en plus la position vers laquelle nous nous dirigeons. On a eu l'occasion aussi, en marge du G7, de discuter par exemple avec le président sud-africain de ce sujet-là et de constater qu'il y a de plus en plus de points de vue communs, pragmatiques, afin de progresser sur cette importante question.
So, indeed, concerning the TRIPS agreement, first of all, there are two proposals now on the table of WTO, one from India, South Africa, and one from the European Union. And we're working closely together to find a consensual approach to have, in the end, a final text. Because we share the same goal. We want that in a crisis like this pandemic, manufacturing possibilities and capacities rapidly can be brought to a region that is at the moment being not in the position to produce, for example, vaccines. Now the question is, what is the best approach? There was the proposal of waiving IP rights. IP rights are the reward for innovation and breakthrough research. And the IP rights themselves do not tell the whole story of how to produce successfully a vaccine. Therefore, there is this new proposal on the table to reach that common goal, to have compulsory licensing in a crisis time like this pandemic. Of course, today we have already a lot of voluntary licensing, very successful. But with this compulsory licensing, you can combine that the remuneration of the IP rights is also decreased to the level that is necessary for those countries to manufacture, for example, at no profit or low costs. And I've been speaking with Cyril Ramaphosa during the G7, so I am positive that we will find a consensual text, that we reach our common goal, that in crisis times, rapidly, it's a matter of speed, rapidly, the possibility to manufacture new vaccines is being brought to countries or regions that do not have it. And for that, we are showing with our initiative with Africa how this can work. You need the private sector, the producing companies. You need public investment, for example, by the European member states or the European Commission. And you need support for the legal framework, the regulatory framework, where we are working with our African friends on establishing an African Medicines Agency that enables the creation of an ecosystem to produce manufacturing capacities. The companies like BioNTech Pfizer or, for example, Johnson & Johnson are very interested in this model. There's a lot of finances of private investment that wants to go in these eco-schemes. What we do as a public sector is de-risk this financing and therefore enable the production of manufacturing vaccine.
Résistez à l'idée de vous prononcer publiquement là-dessus, de vous prononcer en faveur de cette idée-là. Est-ce que vous craignez les conséquences que ça pourrait entraîner, de vous mettre à dos les entreprises pharmaceutiques, autrement dit, la main qui vous nourrit essentiellement en ce moment?
Au contraire, je pense que vous voyez à quel point c'est un enjeu complexe et on partage tous le même but, d'assurer que partout dans le monde, on ait accès à des vaccins efficaces et sécuritaires pour passer à travers le plus rapidement de cette pandémie possible. Mais comme mes amis ont dit, ce n'est pas juste une question de prendre une baguette magique pour le faire. Il va falloir qu'on travaille pour s'aligner, pour s'assurer qu'on puisse réellement livrer ces vaccins rapidement, de toutes sortes de différentes façons, et effectivement qu'on se prépare avec des meilleurs outils pour une prochaine pandémie potentielle. Alors, le Canada, depuis les débuts, est engagé avec tous nos partenaires, y compris et particulièrement à l'OMC, pour s'assurer qu'on trouve le moyen le plus efficace d'assurer et la protection des gens partout dans le monde et aussi qu'on passe à travers cette pandémie la plus rapidement possible. I think what has been highlighted so clearly by my friends and colleagues here is that this is a complex situation. It's not just finding a single silver bullet that's going to suddenly result in vaccines everywhere around the world. There are complexities that need to be worked through, and Canada from the very beginning has been engaged with our allies, with our WTO partners, to ensure that that goal we all share of getting people all around the world vaccinated safely and securely as quickly as possible is met using all the tools at our disposal. And that's something that is shared by governments all around the world, by pharmaceutical companies, by everyone who wants to see us end this pandemic everywhere. So we can end it in each of our countries. That's what Canada has been working on alongside our friends, and we will continue to.
Next question is for Murray Brewster from CBC. Morning.
Good morning. Prime Minister, I have a domestic question for you. We've had more revelations in the military misconduct crisis, and now a potential lawsuit from Major General Fortin. At what point does the government get a handle on this, and at what point does the government consider the chaos within the military and all of the acting positions to be a matter of national security?
First of all, the situation has been going on for far too long. That in the Canadian military, like in many of our institutions, like in many institutions around the world, there has been a culture that has not adequately ensured the protection of the women and men who choose to serve in our military. We need for every woman or man who serves in our military to work in a workplace free from harassment, free from intimidation, and if ever it happens, accessing the resources and the support and the systems necessary to hold those responsible to account. Unfortunately, the Canadian military, like many other militaries around the world, has had a culture that has tolerated those kinds of mistreatments and misbehaviors. And what we are seeing over these past months is that enough is enough. Now, over the past year, since we came into office with strong commitments to being a feminist government, to ensuring protection and equality for everyone, we had taken significant measures to support and protect anyone coming forward. But what we're seeing now is that those measures need to be increased and accelerated, which is why we appointed Lieutenant General Carignan to her role, why we moved former Chief Justice Louise Arbour to oversee a wholesale culture change in our military, and the further issues that we're seeing are illustrating that, as we well know, there's still much more work to do. But I can assure everyone that the continued capacity of Canada and its military to assure our collective security continues to be a top priority. Okay. Je pense que ce qu'on est en train de voir dans nos forces armées et dans des institutions à travers le Canada et même à travers le monde, c'est qu'on ne peut plus tolérer des institutions qui continuent à créer des environnements pas sains pour les femmes, les minorités, des gens qui pourraient souffrir d'abus, d'intimidation ou d'harcèlement. Depuis les débuts en tant que gouvernement, nous avions pris des mesures concrètes en tant que gouvernement féministe pour protéger les femmes et ceux qui se retrouvent dans des situations difficiles en moment de travail. On a amené des changements dans nos processus, dans les appuis qui sont disponibles. Et ce qu'on est en train de voir, c'est qu'il faut en faire beaucoup plus. Et c'est pour ça qu'on a agi depuis plusieurs mois à choisir la générale Carignan pour être au centre des forces armées pour le personnel, de choisir la juge Arbour pour mener une transformation de la culture de nos forces armées. Et nous allons continuer d'assurer que quiconque choisit de servir dans nos forces armées a les appuis, d'abord, soit dans des circonstances, une culture où il y a tolérance zéro pour l'harcèlement, les agressions, l'intimidation. Mais deuxièmement, si jamais il y en a qui arrivent, ils aient toutes les ressources et tous les appuis nécessaires pour pouvoir livrer un processus juste et équitable pour rendre des comptes.
Prime Minister, one follow-up to that. Major General Fortin, in what was filed yesterday, has said that he felt that his removal was arbitrary, and I'm wondering if you're confident that his removal was handled appropriately.
I made a number of comments on this situation when the news first broke a few weeks ago, but because it is now before the courts, I won't be making any further comments.
Next question is for Stephanie Taylor. Stephanie.
Thank you. Prime Minister, the other day you talked about as more Canadians get vaccinated is when you will consider donating more surplus vaccines. Some countries are now looking at giving their residents a third dose to boost protection. So is Canada considering giving away surplus vaccines before? Is Canada considering giving Canadians a third dose of vaccine? And if so, will we be waiting to donate a surplus until Canadians get a third shot?
Thank you, Stephanie, for your question. Obviously, with the announcement we made at the G7 on 100 million doses that Canada and 2 billion through the G7 is directing towards the rest of the world, we are already recognizing, as we have from the beginning, that even as we vaccinate Canadians, we need to be engaged in protecting the world, which is why we moved forward quickly in partnerships on COVAX, why we are one of the 4 countries in the world, including Germany and others, that have fulfilled and even surpassed our Act A commitments. And we will continue to ensure that we are ending this vaccine everywhere, so we can end it in Canada, this virus everywhere, so we can end it in Canada. Every step of the way, we have based our decisions on vaccinations, on health measures, on the best advice of experts, on the recommendations of our top scientists and doctors, and we will continue to do so. And every indication is that full vaccination requires 2 doses, and that's what we're focused on. Okay. Depuis les débuts, nous comprenons à quel point c'est important non seulement de vacciner les Canadiens, mais de participer dans l'aide pour la planète entière, parce qu'on ne finit pas de cette pandémie nulle part si on n'en finit pas partout. C'est pour ça que dès le début, on était un des partenaires les plus présents dans COVAX et qu'on est maintenant un des 4 partenaires qui a rempli toutes ses obligations par rapport à l'accélérateur ACT. Nous allons continuer d'être là pour le monde tout en étant là pour les Canadiens. En plus, évidemment, à chaque étape, nous nous fions sur les recommandations des médecins, des experts, des scientifiques par rapport à la sécurité et la santé des Canadiens. Et jusqu'à présent, toutes les recommandations sont qu'une vaccination complète implique 2 doses.
Thank you. President Michel, I see that Canada is not yet added to the European Union's tourism safe list, its white list, and international travel vaccine certification is certainly something I'm sure all of you have been speaking about and negotiating about. So what date can fully vaccinated Canadians be able to come to Europe for non-essential travel?
We have decided in Europe to cooperate and to decide on a COVID certificate with all the member states, and we think it's very important also to cooperate with third country in order to make sure that in the next weeks, in the next months, we can make progress in order to re-establish the free movement of people, the free movement of travelers. We are working with the Commission, with the European Parliament, and with our friends everywhere in the world in order to try to develop a common approach. Nous avons décidé, les 27 États membres européens, avec la Commission et le Parlement européen, d'établir un certificat Covid afin d'avoir le même niveau d'information sur la question des vaccins, sur la question d'un test, le cas échéant, qui a été administré, ou sur la question d'une contamination antérieure qui donne des anticorps. C'est une première étape importante. Nous avons décidé de mettre en place en Europe ce certificat à l'horizon des mois d'été, du mois de juillet. Et nous souhaitons coopérer avec tous nos partenaires pour le plus possible avoir une démarche de réciprocité qui permet de réinstaurer progressivement la libre circulation des personnes, à la fois les personnes qui circulent à l'intérieur de l'Union européenne, mais également les citoyens qui viennent depuis l'extérieur de l'Union européenne.
Next question is for David Hessenhorn from Politico. David.
Thanks very much, Barron. Mr. Prime Minister, you mentioned the context of your other meetings that you participated in, and given the unpredictability of your Anglophone friends in recent years, and I don't just mean Trump or Brexit, you mentioned the vaccine issue where you found the EU reliable. I wonder, would you support greater EU military integration so that the EU could you envision the EU having military capabilities to the point where your colleagues would participate in NATO summits as they did at the G7, or do you have other priorities on which you'd like to see Canada and the EU leading on the world stage?
Obviously, there are so many priorities in which Canada and the EU are working together very closely that we're always looking for new ways to do things together. But as the other founding transatlantic member of the NATO alliance, I can say that NATO has been extraordinarily impactful in ensuring the safety, security of Europe, not just in the Cold War, but very much in a relevant way today. Canada is leading a battle group in Latvia. We're present with troops in Ukraine. We are part of and integrated into European defense already. In terms of internal discussions that the EU may be having with its member states and with NATO, I will leave that to them.
Well, maybe we could ask the EU presidents their thoughts, but also if you could tell us a little bit about maybe your conversations on some of the wrinkles that have come up, as they always do, with CETA, and do you envision the way you've been able to talk to Canada on the trade issues as a potential model for working out some of the concerns that have come up in the trade agreement with the UK?
Maybe one word about our cooperation at the level of defense. We intend indeed to cooperate in order to strengthen this very important alliance. And indeed, we have also tried at the level of the European Union to reinforce the partnership with NATO. You remember that a few months ago, Jens Stoltenberg participated in a meeting of the European Council. It's a very strong signal that we want to stand, because if we want a strong alliance, it's very important that all the partners are strong. This one first point about trade, about the CETA. Probably the Commission will react on that, but we had indeed the opportunity to observe the important progress made because of CETA in both interests, Canada but also the European Union, and we had the opportunity to discuss some more concrete topics in order to task our team and to try to solve some elements that are important for Canada and for the European Union. This is the way we cooperate, and each summit is the opportunity to identify what are the next steps that are needed. And I remember that the last summit between Canada and the EU, it was the last summit in person, it was in the summer 19. We had identified some topics, and we were very pleased yesterday evening to observe that we had solved the topics that we had identified in the summer 19.
So, of course, we know that NATO is the strongest military alliance in the world. And the allies also are aware of the fact that 22 member states are part of NATO. And if we speak about security and defense, I think the content is broader than the military aspect. The military aspect is important, but the context is much broader. We're speaking, for example, about economic development, or about reconciliation in conflicts, or diplomatic influence in conflicts, which is also of utmost importance. Reconstruction, one of the main pillars of global security. And here, the European Union is playing a very strong role. So there's a lot of complementarity between NATO and the European Union. And then there is another aspect. As I was saying, 22 member states are the cornerstone of NATO. And important is, within the European Union, a high degree of interoperability. And to achieve that, the European Union has created PESCO, to make sure that future investments are aligned, and that we all cherish from, for example, research and innovation that come along with these future investments. And we also know that there's an enormous spillover into the civil industry, civil research and innovation. And therefore, it was a good step forward to organize the Europeans in the PESCO to make sure that development of military equipment is harmonized and has a common pursuit. But as I said, if you look at both entities, the European Union and NATO, they are strongly complementary because you need a broader approach to the definition of security. And what CETA is concerned, I think it's in both our interest to convince our constituency. And I've seen an interesting number that the EU exports to Canada are growing at a way stronger pace compared to the overall EU exports to the rest of the world. So threefold more was the growth of exports towards Canada than to the rest of the world. And that shows CETA is working. CETA is good for jobs. CETA is good for growth. And this, I think, should be convincing to our constituencies and also to the member states who still have to do some homework.
And is it a model for discussions with the UK, that you do this on an unemotional level when issues come up?
You know that I've always said I want a new beginning with old friends, what the UK is concerned. We see that at the beginning now there are difficulties and there are serious issues that have to be solved. I'm deeply convinced with a constructive approach and with the notion that we know it's a long-term relationship we are building here, these issues can be overcome. We know that the withdrawal agreement and the protocol are the best we could have gotten in a complicated situation. It is very good that we have the TCA. And now it's our duty on both sides to make sure that it works and to implement it. I think this is our responsibility to our people on both sides.
Thank you. I'll take one more question from DPA, Verena Schmitz. Are you there? Good morning.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for the question. I'm Verena Schmidt-Roschmann with the German press agency DPA. And following up on what you just said, President von der Leyen, I would like to ask you what can be done concretely to overcome the hurdles for ratification and full implementation of CETA? And if I may, I also have a second question. We understand there's a deal in the works with the United States on Airbus and Boeing tariffs. Maybe you could confirm this. Thank you.
Yes. So for the first part of your question, we know that there are practical, I'd say, just in teething problems and issues on both sides that we have to fix and to overcome. They are very important for certain constituency, without any question. So this is our duty to work on that. And in the broader context, I think the CETA is self-explaining how important and how good it is. So the communication on that is one of the major steps forward. What your second question is concerned, I am very positive that we will find an agreement on the Airbus-Boeing issue today in our conversation with our American friends. I recall very well when I had my first phone call with President Biden, must have been in February, that at that point we had agreed on finding a solution on this aircraft dispute. And we discussed possibilities. We should not underestimate, this is the longest trade dispute in the history of WTO, so it's in our common interest to solve it. And I'm very positive and convinced that together we will deliver today.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. President and Mr. Prime Minister, we'll be publishing the EU-Canada statement on our website, so please check that. Thank you for joining us.